this computer. Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Gilbert, of course. I'm actually doing this master therapist interview while seated in my den through the wonders of Zoom, now that we're on strict lockdown with the coronavirus. And I'm very happy to have as our master therapist this week, Dr. Seth Kadish, who is the director of group therapy at PCH Treatment Center in Mar Vista. And so, Seth, if you want to begin, we can start here. There's Seth, and I usually what I do is I begin with a little bit of background about the person who's being interviewed, because the students are really interested in sort of how you became you, what was your background, and then in particular, because of the subject of the interview, how you came to focus on being a group therapist.
Right. Well, first of all, thanks, Rich. It's nice to talk with you, and nice to meet all the students. Well, kind of meet you guys.
Right.
I love group therapy. You'll hear a bit about it. And very briefly, my background has been, all over the place. And where I really learned to do groups, we're going back about 20 years now. And my first real full-time job experience as a therapist was working in a boys group home, followed by nearly 5 years working with probation girls, and followed by working for a number of years in maximum security prison. So that was kind of trial by fire, particularly working with girls who I would joke and say that I saw a lot more blood run with probation girls than I did with maximum security inmates. We would have riots in our groups, and literally we had pandemonium. And so I was kind of forced to learn what I'd like to teach other people as far as how to do effective or compelling groups. So that's the most important part of my background for our conversation.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
And in your training, did you get experience doing individual therapy?
You mean group therapy?
No, individual therapy.
Oh, did I get, yes, I would say I got some, but a lot of it, when you work in those kind of environments, at least that was my experience 20 years ago, basically thrown in the deep end of the pool. Had very, very low training overall.
Right. So what I was getting at was, had you gone the traditional course, so that is, you're in graduate school, you're learning all the different modalities of therapy, including individual therapy. You had experience practicing individual therapy, and then you had these group therapy experiences, and that was very gratifying to you, so you continued. Or did you not have very much experience in individual therapy?
I would say, right. I would say I had some experience. I definitely had a lot more training in individual therapy than I did in group.
Okay.
Back then, and maybe that was your experience too, I think for a lot of us, maybe that's still going on today. We had 3 semesters of group thalam, and it was very much Yalom style. I don't know if that's still popular, right? Yeah. Which is
For
leads
the
you
students, Irving Yalom is kind of the credited with being the originator of group therapy, at least in modern clinical circles. He wrote the book, The Theory and Practice of Group Therapy, which is a kind of the Bible in the field. But I'm sure it's gone and evolved a lot since then.
And the problem with the book and the problem with learning that style of therapy is it left me wonderfully unprepared to do, real treatment center, probation, or prison work. It was essentially worthless, though I think that he's brilliant and the book is superb and I recommend it. But it wasn't consistent with or helpful with the kind of work that I was called upon to do in those environments, which I think are the typical environments. And I think a lot of students will find out when they get into the work world that that's where more of the opportunities will lie, rather than a nice weekly 1.5-hour psychotherapy group in your office.
And that's really the kind of context that you think Yalom is really writing about, more of a private practice oriented group therapy?
Yeah, and as a case in point, so when you read the Yalom book, he talks about essentially choosing your clients.
Mm,
So you're not going to have a heterogeneous group. It's going to be much more of a focus group. But when you work in a treatment center, as you know and I know, you could have clients of all sorts of various diagnoses, ages, background trauma, cultures, and they're just thrown together. And same thing certainly with probation kids or prison inmates.
right.
So there's no control over that. The other thing, I mean, there's a number of reasons why that style of therapy is not so effective in the kind of work that we do, is that oftentimes in these environments, again, probation, treatment center, residential, dual diagnosis, the clients are living with each other. And so in Yalom's world, once a week for an hour and a half, if clients are at each other's throats or there's misunderstandings or any problems at all, no problem. They're not in contact. They get together a week later and they iron it out. Doesn't work like that with a prison inmate. They iron it out, on the prison yard. That's not a
Yeah,
good thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, so imagine also that, but okay, so the problem is that the 1 hour and a half a week group therapy that you would do in private practice is a kind of artificial environment. As you can say, individual therapy once a week is a kind of artificial environment in a way too. Um, but in the, I think that a lot of people don't practice group therapy in a private practice situation because it's so difficult to get the clients, get that many clients, to coordinate a single time when they're going to get together. There's probably a lot more dropping out, whereas in a treatment center where they're either mandated or committed for a certain duration of time and it's scheduled, you don't have as much of a problem logistically. Is that accurate or no?
Absolutely could not be more accurate. That's
Mm.
right. I think it's very difficult getting the private practice group together and maintaining it. And as you said, people do drop out. And with the other clients, either they're mandated or in certain environments, for argument's sake, prison, you would think that, oh, the guys have to do it. No, for them, for a lot of them, they actually want to do it.
Right,
Maybe in part to break up the monotony, maybe to
right.
learn something and so forth. And they could be pretty rigorous in their attendance.
Yeah,
It would surprise you. Yeah.
right. But you do have um, the issue of people dropping out. Let's say they're in a treatment center and they discharge,
Hmm.
or occasionally their schedule may change, or there is a conflict within
Hmm.
the group that changes the dynamics in a way that's detrimental to the wider goals of the group. So I would imagine that for all of those reasons, there is shifting attendance and composition of the group.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so part of the art of being an effective group therapist is you have to be able to ride with that. So for argument's sake, I'll give you a conundrum that comes up with some regularity is, let's say you're doing a psychoeducational group like DBT, depression management, bipolar support, what have you,
Yeah,
and you have one client in the group who's been there 4.5 months,
right.
and you have another one who's starting today. And
Yeah,
so you have to be sensitive to repeating what you've done with the client who's been there, and at the same time you have to involve and introduce the new client into the group.
yeah.
So
I would think that'd
it's
be
a little bit tap
incredibly
dancing
difficult. I
sometimes.
mean,
Yeah.
because, a psychoeducational group in a clinical sense is very different than running a class. But there are some, but because it's heavily content, oriented, then
Mhm.
there is some similarity to a class. So for
Yeah.
me, if I'm running a class and I cover unit 1 and 2 with, a certain composition of students, and then some of them leave and new ones come in, but half the class has gone through those units and the other ones haven't, I don't
Right.
know what I would do.
Yeah, it's a real problem. But of course, again, it's not exactly like your curriculum. It is a little bit different. So the way I typically do it is I mentioned depression management before. Let's say I'm working off of a
Oh, so
workbook.
you do content psychoeducational groups as well as process groups. Maybe we should
Oh,
make the distinction between those two.
okay,
That's an
perfect.
important
So
distinction.
it's a good point. So I think there are essentially three types of groups that any treatment center would do. Process also, by the way, is a very, very vague term because we have Yalom style, which is very much about working within the room and the here and now, and clients being aware of themselves and others, or the facilitator helps them be aware of what's going on.
Yeah.
And process group can also be, and often are in treatment centers, more about what are you thinking and feeling, what's happening with you at the moment, and probably will not stress the here and now, not typically. So
Okay.
that's process groups. Psychoeducational groups are usually the bulk of a treatment center's curriculum, so to speak. I mentioned a few types of groups that any residential treatment center will offer. And the third type, which we haven't talked about, are more experiential / creative groups,
Mm,
which can be anything from knitting to drawing to poetry to art and so forth. And there
right.
are groups that are kind of walk the fine line between those two, like music therapy and art therapy. So there's so many different types of groups to do. Some people really specialize or love the process work and want to get into the deeper stuff, the issues, the themes, and all that. And some people prefer more the lecture and more the psychoeducational.
Do
So
you, do you
three
ever
basic types.
do you ever in these groups, some of them like a pure process group would, as you're saying, start from what people are going through, and then you
Mhm.
open it up from there. Are there process groups or other groups where you introduce themes and then they apply those themes to their current experience?
There could be conceivably. I don't know that I really do any groups like that. The closest that I have done is a group I do at PCH called Life Topics,
Okay.
which is for more advanced clients. And then I will introduce or ask them if they have a specific topic or theme that they want to bring into the room. It could be the shadow, it could be independence, it could be solitude, Jungian psychology. But
Right.
yeah, that would be less common than more common.
Right.
That kind of group.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So what attracts you to groups? What is the draw?
So something that I know we've talked about a little bit that I would throw into this conversation
Yeah.
is, now, it's not a prerequisite for those of you who are watching this and might be interested in doing group therapy, which, by the way, I think is a wonderful career move. I'm just going to be a little bit mercenary here for a moment. It
Yeah.
is really good to be able to do groups because you can usually find group work out there. It's a nice way of adding to your resume, so to speak. Um, so it's funny. I have so many thoughts in my mind right now. I'll take one at a time. So what attracts me to group, and where I was going with this, is a number of us have some kind of either writing or performing background who do this. Again, not a prerequisite. You don't have to have been a dance major or a cheerleader or a comic, but I think we love the theater of it. It's really exciting, and it's very, what's the word I'm looking for? Not titillating, but let's say unexpected.
Mhm.
When you do a group, you never know what you're going to get. Again, when I work with the probation girls, we literally got riots. I mean, who knew what you're going to get? Uh, and I know that that's true to some degree in individual work. Somebody like yourself who's really expert in that, no session is exactly alike.
Yeah.
But because of the nature of groups, who's showing up, what are we going to talk about, who's in a bad mood, what's going to happen today, there's a real, again, theatrical aspect and, to me, a magic to it. And the really, really great group facilitators, I think, are far and few between, really understand how to kind of weave in the teaching and be spontaneous and engage the attention of people who may not want to be there at all. It's a real art. So
Right.
anyway, I just find it very, very fascinating and interesting every day.
Yeah. Because like in individual therapy, that there's there's more control, and a therapist doesn't have to be a big personality to do it.
Mhm.
In fact, because many individual therapists can be quiet and introspective, and that's fine. But in the group context, you have to be maybe a little bit more extroverted, do you think?
Yeah, I'm laughing because I think that a analogy, and it's, by the way, it's not a good one, but I'm going to
Okay.
throw it out there anyway. It's a
Uh,
bad one.
we
Uh,
support bad analogies.
there you go. Bad analogy would be a little bit like a lion tamer with lions,
Mm,
in that you really have to have command of the room, whether you're doing it in a more subtle way, a humorous way, a forceful way. And I think that's really an essential part of that kind of work to be effective at it. When you watch somebody like a Yalom, he's a relatively quiet, soft-spoken man, but there is an energy or a vibe that he presents or he's giving off that shows that he's in charge of that room.
right.
Let me actually, if Rich, can I shift to something I wanted to bring up?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I actually wanted to mention, and you kind of touched on a little bit before, about obstacles to doing the work. I think so many more people can be really good at it, but the obstacles are either that they're not getting the training in graduate school,
Hmm.
uh, or they feel that because they lack experience, they're a little tentative about jumping in the deep end of the water and trying it. And where I'm really going with this is I think a lot of people have a fear or hesitation about being in front of a group, either judging themselves or feeling that they won't be able to be in command. And the
Yeah.
reason I bring it up is you asked me about my own background. Listen, I started out as lousy as anybody else, and I think I did get better by willingness to go back there every day, no matter how many difficult clients or what the situation was. It's the classic 10,000-hour rule. And I would encourage people, if you have any interest in doing this at all, you push through, know you're going to be bad at it, and you'll get better. Hopefully you'll get really good.
And what's the form of clinical training? I mean, first of all, in graduate school, you're absolutely right. I mean, other than having to read Yalom and talk about it, um, I don't think that I ever got any training in group therapy.
Right.
We didn't have a class on it. We didn't have anybody come in. Um, and it's been interesting to me as I've gone on with my career, as you're saying, that whenever you go to a clinical setting, not a private practice setting, but a treatment center, uh, groups are a major component of the treatment out there. And yet, in most clinical training programs, the vast
Hmm.
majority, I would say, there's nothing, on groups. It's really, really quite amazing.
So I've been thinking about this, and I'd actually like to, if it's okay to do this, I'm going to surprise you with this.
Sure.
But if it's okay that you would like to disseminate or give out my email address to students who are interested, I have a for
Mhm.
free, 50-page workbook on how to do groups. And that might be very helpful for anybody who
Do
has a
you
real
have
start.
that in a digital form?
Yeah, I can send it in a
Send
PDF or a
it to
Word
me,
document.
and I will post it online for all the students.
Okay. Yeah, that would be really good.
Right.
Um, just to give you an overview of when I train people, what I'm training them on,
Yeah.
uh, are basic concepts, starting with the rules, which seems so straightforward and easy and obvious, but I see so many people experienced clinicians making bad mistakes as far as creating rules, maintaining rules, following rules. Uh, Difficult clients is another segment. I actually identify in the workbook, I want to say 11, and all of them call for, uh, if not a unique intervention, they present different challenges. If you're interested, I can tell you a little bit more
Wait,
about that.
these are 11 rules or
Oh, sorry. 11 difficult clients. 11 difficult.
11 difficult kinds? Because I
Right.
got confused. In Yalom's book, he has a list of therapeutic factors that operate in a group that are uh, benefits of groups clinically. Like the
Right.
ability to see one's dynamics operating directly, in the group, things like
Yeah.
that. learning from other people. And he calls those the therapeutic factors, and he has 11 of them. So there might
Oh,
be
oh,
something about 11,
wow.
with
Who
groups.
knew?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
exactly.
had that in the back of my mind or something. But I think it's important to be ready for and aware of what the different challenges will be. And for argument's sake, without getting too into it at the moment, you have a psychotic client versus a psychopathic client versus an oppositional versus what I find to be the most difficult client, which you'll get, but I think for students, this might surprise them, is in a group setting, the help rejecting client.
Mm-hmm.
They are really a problem.
Yeah.
So we have many, many different kinds of clients. And again, how do you deal with all that, particularly if you're a little bit on the novice side or early
These
on
are
in your
the
career?
11 client types, categories of clients that you've
Mhm.
identified in the group work.
Right.
That's
As
really
well as,
helpful,
yeah,
to categorize it and organize it that way. And then you may have different approaches or techniques for each of these categories.
exactly right. I mean,
Yeah.
I have some kind of overarching rules or techniques to follow for any group situation, but those clients, maybe they require just a little bit more individual thought and care.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's that. And yeah,
So
did you
let me make a recommendation. And this is for the class too. When
want?
we were preparing for this video, we noticed that Zoom only allows for an individual conversation to be recorded for up to 40 minutes. And we're up to about a half an hour now. Oh, saying my internet connection
Oh,
is unstable. There it goes. We're up to about a half an hour now. So maybe what we can do is just talk a little bit more about the mercenary aspect of groups and why
right.
groups are really a good specialization to have in terms of career building. And then we can stop there. And then in the second half, we could go through some of those areas of running a group and that you identify in your writings. I really found that very interesting about the process of setting rules and what to do with a difficult client and these kinds of things. I think that would be fantastic.
Okay. So part of my background is, well, I was for a number of years clinical director of one of the elite dual diagnosis programs in Malibu. I'm still affiliated with them.
Yeah,
I can share the name. It's Milestones. It's
sure.
pretty well known. It has a good
Yeah,
national reputation. And the reason I mention that is in my capacity as a director, I was intimately involved with the hiring process. And so whenever we would hire an intern or somebody with a graduate with a licensure, we would always insist that besides individual work, they would have to be able to run a couple of groups a week,
yeah.
and
Okay.
that was mandated. I think that's true again for virtually all the environments I've been in, where part of the job description will be running one or more groups, and so there are jobs that if you're not willing to run groups will be very limited.
Yeah.
You won't be able to get those jobs, or you have to at least show that you have a desire to learn how to
Yeah.
do groups.
Because
Right.
most of the students, I'm sure, when they think about a career in mental health, they think about private practice. I mean, I think that's one of the things that comes to mind. So
Right.
the real benefit of this is that if they were able to add the capacity to run groups, that they'd be employable at so many different treatment centers. Somebody
That's
who has experience and competency in groups is really in a very good position. And then you can layer a private practice with individual clients on top of it.
yeah.
So that would be really really good. The
Yeah.
the the problem is, given that most training places don't really offer specific training, where would one go to get that training? Where would you advise a beginning clinician to get that kind of training?
Well, It's a tough question to answer because there isn't a lot out there. I'm hoping in the future maybe I can offer more to people, and that's why I mentioned the workbook.
Yeah,
Uh, I would suggest that students look at GPALA, which is the Group Psychotherapy Alliance of Los Angeles. It's GPALA.
yeah,
I might have made up a word there. They offer various forms of training. I don't know if it would be as comprehensive as you might need to go forward effectively. But I do think also that treatment centers understand that if you're on the newer part of your career, that you might not be as obviously as experienced as an old pro, and hopefully give you a chance.
yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, just in general though, it's very limited as far as the training out there.
And full disclosure,
Yeah.
in our preparation conversation for this interview, we had talked a little bit about the uh, scarcity of good quality training and preparation to be a group uh, therapist. And I
Hmm.
was suggesting to you that PCH start a training program, a certification program,
Hmm.
for people who wanted to add an expertise in group therapy, given how many um, opportunities there are to work and to earn money if you have that capability. Can you imagine if you really, like someone like you, if you wanted to, work pretty much anywhere, you would just call up, say what you've done, and they probably have groups for you to run.
It's happened on occasion. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Right.
So I think you should do that, and
I,
and there's a way of just sort of putting out the word to people that like interns at the Maple Center or other places that wanted to get certification to help their career. I think you could get a population of people to participate. So it's
that's a great idea.
it's
Really is.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we end this first part of the recording, and
Hmm.
then we'll start another meeting and get into really how you work in groups and some of these principles that you operate on, because I find them very interesting.
Good. Okay.
Okay,
Sounds perfect, Rich.
I'll stop here.
Okay. I'm going to leave the meeting.